Do your friends still text you words during games?
No, I did that when I was...
And do you say no because it got
it
much
got
hype,
people,
or did you actually cut it off?
Yeah, no, I cut it off because people would send me, what you're referring to is people would send me words to get into a broadcast. And it was like kind of a funny thing, hey, send me a word, I'll get it in. And the words became dumber and dumber and more impossible to get into a baseball game. Octopus is not a fun one to try and work into.
Did you work it in?
Oh, yeah. Work it into a casual conversation around a baseball game play-by-play, but you can do it.
You worked in Wasabi?
Wasabi, yeah, I did.
Jub
I did for Conan O'Brien. Yeah. And I started talking about it so much, I didn't really care about it, but the guys I worked with were like, hey man, cool it with that. Because you look like
really?
you have, not my bosses, but guys that I have around me that make me think the right way were like, nah, it doesn't look good. So they don't even send me words anymore. I kind of shut that game down.
What was the hardest one you worked in?
Gosh, I don't know. Like if somebody sent me onomatopoeia, I know how to spell it, but I don't know what it means.
Yeah.
So sometimes on a Cardinal game, I remember going to break and I had like $20. I had $20 riding on this one, and I just said, so at the end of 4 innings, Cardinals lead 5-4, onomatopoeia. That was it. And I got it in, but it just was a drop in and a non sequitur.
Your dad appropriately gets a lot of credit and is brought up, quite a bit. Your dad being the legendary Hall of Fame, longtime Cardinals broadcaster. But just by nature of the job he had, he couldn't have been around probably as much as he would have liked while you were growing up.
Right.
And so it was your mom that you spent a lot of time with. People ask you this question about your dad all the time, so I thought it would be interesting to flip it around. Your mom, Carol, what would you say you most learned from her?
I think, well, first of all, I think I learned more about, if you want to call what I do performing, from my mom than I did my dad. I think what I got from my dad is not a lot different than a lot of kids growing up in the Midwest got from my dad, as far as the style, the way he did a game. There are a lot of guys that came up, that grew up in the Midwest, that wanted to be Jack Buck and wanted to sound and do a game like Jack Buck. I was in that category. I also happened to be his son. But because he did travel as much as he did, my mom had to be mother, a lot of the times father. She had to be the disciplinarian. She had to be the one to, make you feel better when you skinned your knee, that kind of stuff. She did everything. And he met her when she was an actress and singing on Broadway. And she's got as much performing ability and in some ways a very unique skill set that I don't have, the ability to sing in front of people and act and do all that stuff. And she's my best critic. So
better than your dad.
Oh, better than my dad. I think what really benefited me and inadvertently drove me into being a broadcaster was that my dad never pushed me toward it. Because I was so enamored with what came with his job, I was hooked on it early. Because I loved him so much and he was my best friend, I ended up spending a lot of time with him and enjoying what he did as a broadcaster. But he never was the guy going, okay, you're going to do this, and then you're going to go to Louisville, and then you're going to broadcast this way, and let's listen to your tapes. None of that. He just let me find my own way, and my mom will be the one to say, that was great job, or she's told me before, you sounded like you weren't interested, or you sounded like you were tired, or you sounded like, and it gets my attention. I don't like hearing it, but she's right, and I'll go back and listen to it, and she's the one that I get my most feedback from.
What do you think she taught you about the on-air work?
I think I get whatever presence I have or don't have on camera from her more than I do my dad. I think, my dad by nature and by timing was a radio guy. And when he, at the end of his career, was working at CBS and broadcasting with Tim McCarver, who I do the games with now, I think he was not only a TV guy, a radio guy doing TV. To me, at times, he sounded like a radio guy doing TV. It just wasn't what he knew. And on-camera stuff, and it just, he was the best baseball announcer, best football announcer I ever heard in my life. But I think as far as presence and a smile and a way of thinking when I'm on camera, I think I get whatever I get there from my mom.
What do you recall from the experiences of just as you were growing up being in the booth with your father?
That was my home, and it was my summer home. It was my home even during school. It was I would go down there every night. And so I admired the way my dad not only did his job, but what caught my attention were the people he had through there and how he used that as an opportunity to raise money for cystic fibrosis or to welcome a young burn victim. He used it for people to give them an experience they never dreamed of. And I mean, he paid attention to him when he was in the booth, and he'd amble down there and do the inning and come back up and make him feel like $1 million. So to see that and see how he reacted and interacted with people, that was an eye-opening thing that I carry to this day. And he wasn't the kind of guy that had an ego at all. He was there to help others and loved people, and I've tried to carry that forward myself.
To what extent did you find that helped you a lot? I mean, as you saw how he handled fame and people coming up to him when you've since been in similar situations?
Well, I think there's another layer to that. I think when you get into the business as somebody's kid, while it opens up 1,000 doors that wouldn't be open to you normally. I mean, I grew up going down there. So it wasn't like when I got my chance and I was broadcasting for real when I was 20 or 21 out of that same booth, I was in awe of my surroundings. That was like broadcasting it out of my living room for the most part. It just eliminates all that stress and you can just kind of do the job. I would tell you that being somebody's son and getting into it, I think for the rest of your life, you fight the nepotism thing, no matter what you do after that. And my dad was so well known in St. Louis and so well known nationally that I will forever be known as Jack Buck's kid.
But I mean, maybe in St. Louis, I think that's...
No, I get it, believe me. I get it, when I was very active on Twitter, that was one of the main things that people would fire at me as a criticism. Good thing you had a famous dad, you suck. I can't believe you're doing this game. And people know that stuff. And I think it's only human nature. But to answer your question, I never looked at being a major league announcer or an NFL announcer or whatever as the end all. There are other things I want to do with my life. And I've got the best job in the world. I'm the luckiest guy in the world. But that doesn't entitle me to be a jerk. If I get hit by a bus walking into the stadium, they won't even have a moment of silence. And I promise you they'll play the game. So that's not why I'm there. That's not why somebody's tuning in the game. Could be why somebody tunes it off, but that's not why somebody's watching their team. So when people start thinking that way, that's why they're there, I think it's a quick spiral downward and you're going to get slapped in the face. And that's how I saw him. The game was it. The players, they were it, not the guy calling it. And I can tell you, that's just not that's the way I think. I don't think the other way. And I see some guys that act and broadcast that way.
Did you really lie on your resume that was given to Fox to get the, when you were trying out for the NFL play-by-play job, that you had done football at Indiana?
I don't know if I lied. I think when I had conversations with them, and it was those guys that were my bosses then remain my bosses now. And we all kind of laugh about that time because I'd never done football in my life. And they were like, you've done football. I'm like, oh yeah. No, I did it. And did some in college, and absolutely, I got that down. Except, they weren't that smart because the only video I had on then videotapes, which they used to have in this world, I gave them, it had a ton of baseball on it. It had me hosting a couple specials, and then it had horse jumping, which I did on ESPN for Bud Sports. So it was mysteriously left off the tape because it didn't exist. And I had to go out there and audition
Right.
and do a game off a TV monitor. And, I ended up getting the job just by sitting in a studio and doing that audition. And I shudder to think if I had a bad day or did something that wasn't right, if I missed on that job, who knows what would have happened.
And you said for a while you felt like you were faking it, in the booth.
Well,
What do you mean?
I faked it when I was really young.
I mean, what do you mean, like faking it?
Well, because probably my voice was up here when I was 21, and I thought, you know what, I sound like a little 4-year-old, and I need
Actually, there is a big difference between your tapes,
Yeah,
right.
Well, because I've retrained my voice. I retrained my voice from an upper register. When I sang in high school, and I did sing in high school, I was up here, and I can't get up there anymore. Because I faked my way to a lower voice. Every time I opened my mouth, if I wanted my voice here, I'd shot for down here to sound older than I was. I was doing major league games when I was 20, filling in, 21 when I was full time, and that's early. And I just don't think I was as prepared as I could have been emotionally for that.
Was there something you really did to train your voice?
No,
other than
I
what
just
you
think
just said?
every time I opened my mouth, I consciously thought of sound older than you are. And, I don't know that I've ever really thought of it that way, but that's what I was doing. And there are times where in sheer excitement, there's a call I made of a Ray Langford play at the plate where he knocked over Darren Dalton, where I sounded like Peter Brady in the throes of puberty. And, I just lost it. My voice cracked, and it's an exciting call, but it was embarrassing too. And that was one where my dad said, "Here, sit down." I think it was the 12th inning. It really wasn't my turn. And then they won the game, and I was like, "Thanks, Dad." Now I've been exposed as the 12-year-old I am.
How did he help in getting those jobs early on?
Well, I think take the Cardinal job out of it. He helped with the Cardinal job because flat out I was my dad's kid, and it was unique or novel to have Jack Buck's son Joe, who's now a broadcaster and has worked in Louisville AAA broadcasting for 2 years. I filled in for my dad. That was the irony of that whole thing. Mm-hmm. That said, at Fox, I think he helped because his reputation was that of a good guy, and I think I got into it as being, hopefully, like him, a good person that will work hard. He was at CBS. Ed Gorin, who was one of the decision makers at Fox, was at CBS. He got the job to run the network. And, it was my mom who gave my resume tape to Ed Gorin's wife, and that's how I got the audition.
Right.
So beyond that, if I was no good or if they didn't think they didn't owe my dad anything. It was a new network, and I think they just wanted some new young guys.
How long did it take you to get comfortable in the booth?
Probably about 5 years. Probably about 5 years, but I don't know that you're ever really comfortable. I think the discomfort leads you to work really hard. And, I think the perception is for guys that do play-by-play, you just kind of roll in and show up and just start talking, and whatever you see, you describe, and then you go home, and that's the end of it. And I prepare really hard. I do a lot of work to get ready for broadcast. And I think the comfort comes from knowing not just what I have to do to get ready for a game, but even more so what I don't have to do and what I can eliminate from my preparation so that I'm totally ready. And when the game starts, I can just react. And, I've put the work in, so I'm ready to go.
Where does the discomfort come from?
Forever. Every broadcaster's nightmare and literal dream is showing up at a game where you don't know the names or who's playing or where you are or what the score is. You can't see the scoreboard and you're trying to fake your way through. Mm-hmm. When you do a World Series, and I was 27 the first time I did a World Series in New York, that's plenty of discomfort. And you always feel like you're going to get exposed as some fraud. And I think part of that probably comes from being my dad's son and thinking, I got this great break because I'm somebody's kid, and now here I am. Am I really ready for this? Am I capable of doing a World Series? do I really belong in this group of guys like Al Michaels and Bob Costas and Kurt Gowdy and Vin Scully and my dad? And I don't feel like you ever really feel totally comfortable with that.
Take me through the detailed progression of your preparation for that week leading up to a game.
Yeah, I mean, it's different now because I'm the weekend warrior. I just do Saturdays or Sundays. So I don't like to miss a day. I like to make sure that I'm on top of what happens every day. It's hard to catch up, and for me, in my mind, I can think in a sequential way, knowing that Monday this team did this, Wednesday they did this, and on the way to Saturday or Sunday for football. So just reading every day, reading a couple hours a day, and believe me, I don't feel or try to make my job sound harder than it is preparation-wise, but I read a couple hours a day. I will get on the phone and talk to whoever I feel like I need to if I have a question about something. I'll interact with.
Would that be a beat writer for?
It could be.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be a beat writer. It could be a scout. I've got a guy that works with me, Steve Horn, who the main people he talks to are scouts that actually sit and watch these games and have an opinion. And it's not just statistics, and there's analytical stuff involved too, and seeing if these guys, where they're lacking physically, or what they're great at. That's what I love talking to him about. So he and I talk every day, and kind of in preparation for whatever game we have that weekend. And then we get in, baseball Friday for a Saturday game, football Friday for a Sunday game, go to the home team facility, watch tape, talk to players and coaches informally, and then talk as a group and interact and kind of point toward the game.
That board you put together, what does it entail?
It entails the basics at the beginning of the week, and that's something that I build as the week goes. But that's something I put together on Monday, and I'll get names, numbers, heights, weights, college, years in the NFL, main stats on there. And then as the week goes on...
Is that only for NFL, or
That's only for NFL.
Okay.
As the week goes on, then I'll add notes, the stuff that I compile during the week, and I'll hand write things in there. I kind of pick and choose what I find important, and I have one of those old style pens with different colors in them.
Oh yeah?
That red is really important, green is kind of important, and the rest of the stuff.
Is that the thing with the...
Yeah, you push the different ink things down. So I'll give you one.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can take it and show your
Generous
friends.
of you.
Yeah.
How well do you recall the article the St. Louis Post-Dispatch's Dan Caesar wrote before you even called the Cardinals game?
How I remember it really well. I remember one line of it really well. I remember my reaction to it really well. One line of it, and you probably read it, but it had in bold, what's most offensive about Joe Buck's hiring was blah, blah, blah. And it went on to say that there's so many guys struggling in the minor leagues trying to get their shot, and now here's this 21-year-old kid who's going to fill in for his dad because it's nepotism, and it's nepotism on steroids. And that crushed me. I remember reading it, and I was still living at home. I mean, I didn't have my own place at that point, and I was in the room that I grew up in, and I bawled. I cried because I thought, my God, this is how it's starting. How is this? Because I was nervous and not confident and didn't know if I could handle it. Now all of a sudden I'm offensive. My hiring's offensive, and Dan and I, the writer of the article, laughed about it since because we've become, good friends. And but that was a shocker. It's probably the best thing that could have happened to me, though, because that's real life, and that's the real world. And the real world is it's natural to say, well, I know how he got his leg up, and it was accurate. And I had to put my head down and plow right through that, which was good.
And I know you say the criticism doesn't bother you today, but I mean, something tells me it gets to you a little more than you might lead on.
Criticism does bother me. I don't look for it. You've always got the one friend that if somebody writes an article that you didn't see, they're sure to forward it to you so that you do see it. But yeah, it bothers me because it's just maybe a weakness. But when I read stuff, or that leads into the Twitter thing, or that leads into Facebook or whatever, that you stick your chin out there, and you better be willing to have a really thick skin and put up with a lot of stuff, because the sports world, it can get pretty vicious. And I don't look for it. When I see it, I gulp and read it and move on about my life, but it gets in there.
The criticism is no longer just about the broadcasting career. I mean, people get on you about literally everything. I Googled your name a few days ago in preparation for the interview. I mean, what's bothered you the most about all of that?
Well, it bothers you to a certain extent, and then when you look at the bulk of it, you realize that they don't know me at all. I mean, that's kind of the fallacy of this whole thing is, and it's not just me. I'm a mosquito on this thing. But whether you're Jennifer Aniston or these people that get it all day, Britney Spears when she melted down, people like that, you feel like you know these people, and so everybody feels like a right to comment on stuff that's going on in their life, and I've just never bought into that, because if you Google my name, I mean, that would put together the image of somebody that I'm not in any way, shape, or form. So, once you realize that, I don't know that you really get that wrapped up in it. So it's fine to let it live out here, but I'm not really going and chasing all that stuff down. It is what it is. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny in some respects, and it's kind of sad in other respects, but that's the way of life.
You said the most intense feeling you've ever felt in the broadcast booth was, I believe it was your second Super Bowl when the Giants beat the Patriots. What about that made it so intense?
Well, you can let the size of the crowd when you do a Super Bowl overwhelm you if you want. And that opening on camera is one of the most intense, awkward feelings you can ever have. In fact, it was at that Super Bowl when I was standing up there in front of the lights. Troy and I are getting ready, and there was about 1:10 till we were on, and we're going to set up this game, the Super Bowl, and everybody's sitting around watching it. And our cameraman, Ben, who's always in the booth, great guy, is back there looking. He goes, "You got something in your hair." And I'm like, "What?" It starts, the guy, well, minute 10 do I go on. He goes, "I don't know, it's like a big glob of hair gel or something. You got to fix that." I'm like, "I only got them." So I unhooked, ran into the bathroom, which was out and around, and I had this big clump of hair gel, looked like, something about Mary. And you can cut that out, or don't, I don't care. And I'm shushing that through my
relieve stress before the
hair. Game. Yeah, you talk about. And then so the whole time I'm on camera during that beginning of a Super Bowl going, how bad does my hair look right now? This is awful. And I'm not really listening. So that's the aside. The real part of it is in the fourth quarter with that kind of an audience, that kind of a game where it's going back and forth, and New England's looking for a 19-0 perfect season, and the Giants are on fire and playing great that postseason, and Eli is in his brother's shadow, and I mean, it was so intense. My heart was going to jump out of my chest, not because I was scared or nervous. It just was awesome and exciting, and which is funny because one of the criticisms you'll get from a Giants fan if you go online or whatever, which I'm sure you have, is the Tyree catch, that I didn't scream and pull a groin about the Tyree catch. And the funny thing is, when you're doing that game, you have to be dead sure that what you're saying is right. And first of all, I could barely see Manning come out of there, and secondly, I couldn't see the catch all that well because there was twisted body, but it was incredible. And that whole march down the field is something I'll never forget.
I want to touch on some notable games from your career. The first one being 17 years old, and you're in the booth with your dad, and you end up getting kind of forced onto the air.
Literally. I mean, I got basically wrestled down onto the air. I guess because of guilt, but my dad and Mike were doing the game, and I was up in the back of the booth not really paying attention, and it was my 18th birthday. It was, I think, maybe 17.
You probably know better than me.
No, at this point, I think you know better than me. It was on my birthday, and it's at Shea Stadium, and I hear my dad say, now to take us through the 5th inning is my son, the birthday boy, Joe Buck. And I hadn't been paying attention, and I'm like, no, please don't. And he and Mike got up and left the booth. So it was empty. And the inning starts, guy throws the first pitch, and I run down there and do it. And it was, thankfully, one of the quickest innings I've ever done in my life. It was like a pop-up, a ground out, and a strikeout. And no scoring, no nothing. And I've never heard it since. So do you have
really?
it? No, I've never heard it.
You were thrilled, though. I know you called one of your friends right afterwards, and you were excited that you got through it.
Yeah, I was.
You had another good experience at Shea Stadium, the first television broadcast that you did. You were filling in for Ken Wilson.
I was doing TV, and I'd never done TV baseball before. I'd done radio in Louisville, and I came up to fill in at Shea Stadium, and it was the worst possible scenario because they had a rain out. And so that day was a doubleheader, and they're like, whatever's going on at 7 o'clock Eastern time, 6 o'clock St. Louis time, that's when we come on the air. So if it's the middle of game one, if it's in between the two games, that's where we are. So when the clock strikes 7 in the East, for whatever reason, we were in the 9th inning of the first game. So we pop up on the air, and there I am doing the play-by-play of the 9th inning. And the Cardinals were winning, I think, because there was a break. And they said in the break, we're going to go through the highlights of what's happened. And I'd never done highlights in my life. So I'm like, okay. So they start running the highlights, and I can't keep up, and I don't know what's going on. And I'm trying to run on this treadmill, and I'm late, and I can't. Then in between, I'm going to do a stand-up thing on camera where I look in and I recap the first game, and I'm telling about the Cardinals, and then I say, and now, and meanwhile, I've caked all this brown makeup on my face because I was on TV. That's what you're supposed to do, is put makeup on your face. And I say, and now for an interview down the field, let's go to Al Hrabosky. And they're like, I see the person behind the camera like do this, like keep talking, because Al couldn't find his mic down on the field. So it's 150 degrees in the booth at Shea. Now, to me, it feels like 300. I start sweating. All the brown makeup is running down onto my shirt. And the earpiece pops out of my ear, and now I have no communication with anybody. And I keep saying, now let's go down to the field. Al Hrabosky's got an interview. The guy behind the camera's like, so I can hear the stage manager going, take the camera off him. Take the camera. So they do, and the stage manager comes up and is patting my face as I'm talking. And so it was a blessing in disguise, though, because once the second game started, I was so worn out and so frazzled, I just did the game.
Your most satisfying experience in the broadcast booth?
Probably getting through a Super Bowl clean. And I say that because it seems like when you do a game like that, there's very little upside. There's a lot of downside. You know, if you make a glaring mistake, or if you say something you shouldn't, or what, I mean, the whole world's watching. So to have done Super Bowls and have had them go pretty clean, that is really satisfying. To get in the car at the end of that game and go, all that buildup, all that hype, and I didn't make a fool out of myself, that's a good feeling.
Yeah, I want to take you back, I guess a little more than 10 years now, to when your father was ill. That period of your life, you know, you're getting letters, you're hearing stories from lots of people in the community. What most surprised you about the feedback you were getting?
The volume of things that he did that we as a family had no idea about. You know, there are a handful of famous banquet stories or people he met along the way, differences in lives that he made. But the number of people that called into the radio station the night he passed away, to KMOX in St. Louis, and then the next couple days, I just sat there and listened to it. And people with personal stories, how many people he walked up to, not that walked up to him, that he walked up to and asked them, you know, how their day was going, or asked about their family, or it just was mind-blowing that he took the time and was that much of a people person and made that big of a difference in his time on earth. So, you talk about going out with the needle on empty. I mean, he did everything he could do in the years that he was here. And, I was lucky to be his son, and I benefit from that every day.
You said you guys had great conversations late at night when you both were in the hospital, or when you were in the hospital visiting him.
Yeah, we talked about everything. Talked about the Cardinals a lot, talked about the family, talked about my family, talked about, what was going on the outside walls. He was in a prison. I mean, it was an intensive care unit, but he was in a prison for 7 months. And anybody watching this, everybody's got a story about somebody who was sick and somebody who, but that was the time where I got to live it with him. And he and I were so close and so tight that I treasured those conversations late at night. And I remember one night in the intensive care unit, I went in there and he said, and it was the ultimate of ironies, he couldn't talk because he had a trach in his throat. So he had to mouth things. And he said to me, I hope my time in here laying in this bed has taught you to make the most out of your time, to live your life, have fun, build your house, do whatever you're doing, because when you're laying here, it's too late. And that just kind of hung there in the air for a while. And that's something I'll never forget. And so I've tried to live that way ever since. And so whether it's career or family or whatever it is it's been, and a lot's changed since he was around to talk to about a lot of this stuff, that's always kind of echoing in the back of my head. And I think it wasn't just him. I think that was God or something else talking to me at that time, because it really hit home.
The night before he passed, you'd been in the hospital every single night for 7 months, every single day for 7 months. And the night before he passed, you walked out of the room, you're with your wife, your sister, and you tell them, that's it, you aren't going to go back. Why did you feel that way?
Well, the next day was the day that they were going to pull all the tubes out, and they were going to, basically, we had made a decision as a family that it wasn't going to get better, and he was in so much agony with infection and everything else that he was battling when he was in the intensive care unit, that was it. And so the next day they were going to pull the tubes out, and he was going to be on his own. He'd been on a trach for months. He had had a pacemaker, and that was gone, and he wasn't going to have any assistance with his heart. And so that was going to happen at 9 or 10 the next day. And I'd been in there every day for 7 months, and I'd said what I wanted to say to him. He heard me. He was in a lucid state. And I walked out of there and said to my wife and my sister, that's it. I'm not going to come here and watch him die. I'm not doing it. This isn't a movie. I said what I wanted to say, and he knows how I feel, and that's it. And, that leads into the next day, which they pulled all those tubes out of him at, let's say, 10 a.m., and we thought it would be quick. And I'm waiting by my phone kind of for the update, and it doesn't come. And my brothers and sisters are there, my mom's there, people are coming and going, and everybody's just kind of waiting, and it just isn't happening. So 2 o'clock comes, 3 o'clock comes, 4 o'clock comes, 5 o'clock. I go down to the ballpark to broadcast the Cardinals and Angels game.
And why, when you knew that was kind of...
Well, that's how he would have done it. That's what he would have wanted me to do, is go do the game. That was my job, and there wasn't anything I could do. And I think he would want me to go do what I was supposed to do. And they pulled the TV down by his head as I did the game, and he has no assistance. And he's pretty stable. And so on my way back from Busch Stadium, I drive right by the hospital, and he still hasn't passed away. And I pull over and I go in, and I walk up, and it's the best right turn I've ever made in my life, because I went up, and for the first time in months, I saw my dad neatly tucked into a bed, no tubes, no beeping, no nothing. It was quiet. The nurses got up, walked out. I went in and bent over and talked in his ear, And I repeated a lot of the stuff I said the night before, and I said, you need to know that it's time to go, and you need to know that I've got everything covered here. I'll take care of Mom, I'll do my best for the family, and I've got everything handled. And I love you, and we've had an unbelievable run together, and it's time for you to let go. And I stood up and walked out, and he died 2 minutes later. And I don't know that I've ever told that story, but something tells me that he was waiting for me to show up. And I'm glad I did, because had that not happened, there would have been something that was left unsaid. And for him to stay alive that entire day with no help, and then to listen to the game and know that I was 5 more miles down the highway, I think he expected me to come, and I'm glad I didn't let him down.
What's it like for you being a dad?
It's the greatest, most important job that I have in my life. You know, I have 2 girls, and I believe they know where they sit on my list of things that are important to me. They're 1 and 1, and there is no 2, 3, or 4. And you know, growing up in the 80s, you know, all those John Hughes movies about, you know, parents that didn't get it and parents that were disconnected from their kids, and I would laugh at them because they were funny, Breakfast Club and all that kind of stuff, 16 Candles, but I didn't really get it because my parents were so close, and we were all so close as a family, and I had so much love poured into me from them and my sister that now I'm able to turn that around and give that to my girls, and they know that they own me, and they take advantage of that sometimes.
Yeah.
But you know, I made a comment one time in the New York Times to Richard Sandomir when he said, you know, how can you call yourself the Fox voice of baseball if you're not doing every Saturday game? And I said, I'm fearful of overexposure on TV and underexposure at home. And you know, I lived it as my dad's son. Everything worked out great, but
Was there something you took away from that impacted how you are as a father?
absolutely. He missed a lot of my stuff, and simply put. And I never had any ill will or held a grudge. I knew why he was gone. He wasn't gone because he was out gambling. He wasn't gone because he was out drinking. He was gone because he had to work. But if I could, I wanted to be in a position where I could be there for that stuff. And I drive carpool in the morning, and I pick up at the end of the day and go get snacks and do all that stuff and drive lunch up to them at school. And that's the most fun part of my day. And so, you know, I'm very fortunate in that. And they're great girls. They're great kids, and they're not brats, and they're grounded, good girls.
So you mentioned the HBO show. It's obviously, you know, short-lived, supposed to be.
About as short as you can have a show. I don't know that it qualifies.
As a talk show, quarterly, ended up lasting 3 of the scheduled 4.
Quarterly ended up as a third.
Right.
Thirdly.
Or 75%. Did it last for
It's not a
3
bad
of them?
grade. It's like a solid C.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, apparently between the first and the second show, it ended up becoming pretty heated between you and HBO. I think at one point, you know, you're sitting in your car on the phone with HBO, literally screaming at them. Why did it become so
I can't
heated?
deny that. When Artie Lange came on, and I can't assume that everybody knows what the Artie Lange situation is, but he came on the live HBO show, and he was exactly what I asked him to be. I mean, it was over the line.
And Lange being Howard Stern fan, comedian.
But I went into him beforehand. I said, look, man, when you get out there, light me up. I can take it. It's fine. I want it to be fun. I want it to be. We talked afterward. I mean, he got pretty vulgar, and it was tough to sit there because I couldn't really jump back at him. I had to be the host, and so that was hard to just sit there and take it and not give back. But that's fine. That didn't make me upset or sad or mad or like want to go suck my thumb in the corner. That's what we asked for. And so HBO reacted like they were going to have him deported. And the frustrating thing for me was, you know, we led into like pornucopia or something. It wasn't like it was that. This wasn't like on PBS. So he did what we expected. And he and I talked a couple days later, and he's like, look, man, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I got a little carried away. I got the first joke, the first laugh, and I'm a comic. That's what I do. So that's a pretty good Artie Lange.
That was impressive,
So
actually.
I said, leading into show 2, we've got to have him back. Everywhere I go, people are yelling Artie Lange and whatever. I said, we've got to have. I can't act like that didn't happen. So I'm not going to walk out on the stage and they're like, under no circumstances are you going to even refer to Artie Lange. I said, well, you got the wrong guy, because I'm not going to walk out there and avoid that. I said, I'm either going to do the show and talk about Artie and have Artie on in some capacity, or I'm not going to do the show, because that's not me. And I'm not going to go out there with my hands tied behind my back. I ended up talking to the head of HBO, and he said, it's over and done with, forget it, don't talk about it. And I'd already booked Artie to do the cold open with me in Times Square. And so we wrote it up. I said, well, think about it, either cancel the show or have him on. But that's the way I as the host, want to do it. And obviously it's up to you, it's your network. And so they said, okay, against our better judgment, we'll let you do it. But make sure it's done well and make sure it's done tastefully, which is their right to do. And so, as it turns out, we do this comedy bit, where I bump into him in Times Square and it spins him around, it spins me around, and he's looking at me like the Belushi, like, hey, old buddy. And I look at him and I kind of acknowledge him, and then I just sprint through Times Square, and he turns and runs after me. And that's how we started the second show. And in the room, when that came up, the place went crazy. They loved it. And HBO afterward, to their credit, they were like, it was funny, and it was the right thing to do, and it put it to bed. I never had to say one more word about it on that show.
A great way to start a live show.
It is. It was fun. I mean, my God, everything's so serious, and if you can't laugh, or if you can't joke or whatever, or that was, nobody got killed. It just was what it was, and you move on. I've never acted that way.
What do you think you learned from, the whole experience?
I learned so much in 3 shows. First of all, I did a live talk show, which is pretty rare, and I got through them, and I was comfortable, and I liked a lot of the interviews. They weren't all great, but that's live TV. But I think I learned to kind of make sure what I jump into suits how I want to be represented, and I'm sure they would say the same thing. We all shook hands and walked away, and it was fine. There's no ill will. But I wish we had gotten more of a chance to do shows and see where it evolved, how it evolved, and where it got, because we only did 3 shows, and they were spread out with months in between. And somebody said to me, that's like canceling Conan after 3 nights, like on Wednesday. I wish we had a better crack at doing it for a longer time and just see what came out of it.
To get the reps. I mean, as you've even said to students, like, there's nothing that, can prepare you for something until you're actually, in there doing it.
Yeah, you can't get polished at anything unless you do it a number of times, and that's the only way to do play-by-play, and that's the only way to host a show.
Back in '99, you said 10 to 15 years from now, I don't think I will be doing play-by-play.
Let me tell you why I said that.
Okay.
And I think I would still say that going back in time, because I grew up around this. I've been around a booth and doing play-by-play since I can remember. And I haven't done it all my life, but I did the Cardinals. I started in 1991 full-time. So, I mean, I've been at it for a while now. And, at some point, whatever the next chapter is, it'll be. But I just don't see myself growing old doing it. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll eat these words, and I love what I do. But I think eventually the travel, the weekend stuff, something else will come up. Life's too precious, and too many things happen to say, when I'm 65, this is what I'm going to be doing. I hope I am 65 someday. Maybe I won't be. One thing I'd like to do is I'd like to teach. and that may be difficult considering I didn't graduate college. But if they're willing, some university or high school is willing to teach or hire a teacher that doesn't have a degree, I'm your guy. Because I'd like to teach broadcasting. I'd like to kind of give what I know and see, a young person who desperately wants to be a big league announcer improve. And I feel like I'm at that point. I had so many things given to me, and just through life experience, and so many things that my dad showed me by example, that I'd like to turn around and give that to others that want to do it. And it's such a popular profession now that I think I could have a lot of fun doing that.
How did you figure out that something was wrong with your voice?
I really, it took a long time to figure out because I couldn't talk. I couldn't make a noise. I went from, I'm kidding. I mean, I thought I had a virus. I did have a virus, but I thought I had a cold. And
this was right after the NFL season?
Bowl.
You're on vacation?
I had gotten back from vacation and got a virus. And I just thought, well, I'm hoarse for a couple days. But it was a different kind of hoarse. It wasn't the normal kind of, I have a sore throat. So I went to a doctor here in St. Louis at Barnes, and he said, I already know what it is before I look, but I'm going to look anyway. And he looked and he said, yep, like I thought you have a paralyzed vocal cord because of the sound I was making was different than if I just had a cold. So I said, well, okay, what does that mean? Is that like a 3-week thing? It's like, no, it could be 3 months, it could be 6 months, it could be 12 months, or it could be never coming back. And that was a tough sentence to listen to. And so I launched myself into any kind of recuperative thing I could.
And when he said never, how serious was he when he said, there's the chance it could never come back?
Oh, he was serious. I mean, it's an out. I think every doctor wants an out. I mean, nobody can say you will be fine in 3 months. Nobody wants to throw that out there. But the odds were that it was going to come back. But living with it every day and gauging how my voice sounded every time I opened my mouth was something I never want to try to go through again, or trying to recover in public is hard to do.
Well, your best friend Preston told me, I mean, he tried to get you on the phone for literally 3 months and he couldn't. And he said he almost flew from Charlotte, where he lives, to St. Louis on a plane to visit you because he was so worried. What were you going through then?
It's a weird phenomenon. It had nothing to do with work, that part of it. What it does do to you when you can't be heard in a bar, at a restaurant, sitting around a table, on the phone, when one side of your vocal cords come together to make a noise, one of them's laying over here, you lose all your air. So you can't keep your breath, let alone what kind of a noise you make. So I just didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to get on the phone. I didn't want to talk to him. I didn't want to, just because every time I said a sentence, I was like, oh my God, I sound awful. And I would just rather be quiet and not hear myself. So it kind of turns you into a recluse, whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, did you really find yourself being that way?
Totally.
And did you know friends, or maybe family for that matter, were concerned?
I think everybody was concerned about me because it's, as I said, it's hard to recover in public, and it's also hard to do the job I was doing when you can't keep your breath. So when something unexpected would happen, I had nothing in reserve to make a loud, excited noise. I couldn't emote with my voice, and it just became just really boring. Right. But then regular conversation, it was brutal. And I remember doing an appearance on Jimmy Fallon's show. I sounded awful. And I left there. It's crazy how your mind works. Because I left there and I thought, I sounded good. Your mind tells you something different. And I think it was the only way I could have gotten through that, is to kind of lie to myself a little bit. Because if I had gone back and watched that, I probably would have shut it down. But I'm lucky to work at a place, and for a man, David Hill, who said, take the rest of the season off. Take a year off. Whatever it needs to be, get right, and we'll go from there.
Another person close to you said just that few-year period was kind of the darkest period of your life with everything that you were going through then. I mean, to what extent did you find it as tough as kind of those around you were perceiving it to be?
It was tough to go through it. It was tough to go through it, but everybody's got trials in life. I tell you, it led me to church more often. It led me into a real introspective place that I really had never been before. It made me worried about what I was going to do work-wise going forward if it didn't come back. But that said, I look back on it, and it was, people say this, and I never believed them, but it was the greatest thing that could have happened to me. It made me reevaluate everything, and it made me not take for granted stuff that I was just blowing off. The quality sound of my voice, was something that I never thought of. I'd only had laryngitis one time, and all of a sudden I'm worried just about not what I'm going to say, but how I'm going to say it and what sound's going to come out. And it makes you appreciate all you have. And I, believe me, I appreciate all I have.
Since you've been back, has it really been the most enjoyable time broadcasting?
Oh, it's been unbelievable. It's like...
Really? I mean...
It's been unbelievable. It's like...
With as long as you've been doing it for?
Yeah, because I would imagine, I would probably liken it to going to the plate with a weighted donut around a bat, like they warm up with in the on-deck circle, and then they knock that thing off and they step into the plate. To not have to worry about that and to know that I've got my voice back, even though because I've been talking for an hour and a half, it's shredded right now, has been awesome. And it's made Sundays and Saturdays so much more fun for me. And I can just relax and do my job again.
You've said if you were Major League Baseball commissioner for a day, you would mandate umpires calling more strikes.
I think it would speed the game up. And I think there'd be a growing period, an adjustment. But I think if pitchers knew they had more room to work with, and if hitters knew that more strikes were going to be called, they'd go up there ready to hit and ready to swing instead of waiting around for the perfect pitch, and you get a little more action that way. I think that's the only real way to speed up the game, which is something they think about all the time.
Tell about your experience with Barry Bonds.
No. Yeah, it was a long time ago, early in my career, and I was in the dugout with Don Baylor. He said, it's just such a shame that Barry seems like he just doesn't have any fun playing the game, or he's ready to yell at somebody or bite somebody's head off if they ask the wrong question. He said, oh, Barry's bark's way worse than his bite. Come on, I'll introduce you. And so he gets out of the cage, and Don Baylor goes, Barry, this is one of our radio announcers, Joe Buck, Jack Buck, this is his kid. And Barry's like, so? It's like, okay, I had my hand out, and that was it. And so I just walked back with my tail between my legs and looked at Don. I was like, yeah, you're right. Great guy.
In your opinion, who's the home run king?
Yeah, that's a great question. I kind of look at it, maybe the unseen or unsaid asterisk. I mean, the home run king to me is Hank Aaron. But statistically, it's Barry Bonds. And I would be a hypocrite if I just said what I said, which was it's impossible to say certain guys are and certain guys aren't. We think we know. And Bonds is in a situation where he has said that he didn't know what he was putting onto or into his body. So I just look at it as almost two different records, two different times in the game. And it doesn't upset me like it does others. I just think we have to realize that that was all over baseball, a lot more than we knew at the time. And, there's Hank Aaron in a different era, and there's Bonds now.
How about your best Mark McGwire story?
Mark was always misunderstood to me. And I say that because he just was kind of the reluctant superstar at that time. Now he's admitted performance-enhancing drug use, and that's a different conversation. But at that time, when he would take batting practice and people would react, even in Montreal, they'd come early to see him take batting practice. He's like, I just don't. He got out of the cage one time and he and I just hit it off, so we always talked. He said, I don't get it. I don't know why they're all clapping and hooting and hollering. I'm like, Mark, you're hitting balls where nobody has ever hit them in this stadium. They're freaking out. He's like, yeah, well, I mean, who cares? And that's kind of how he was genuinely. So when he became, you know, the new single season home run guy, and he would be around St. Louis and people would come up to him, he's just like, kind of like, what do you want? He didn't buy into all that stuff, which I give him a lot of credit for. He just, you know, he walked away from $30 million at the end of his career because he didn't want to be a batting practice trick pony. He wanted to be either Mark McGwire or not, and he walked away.
Should a known or even assumed performance-enhancing drug user whose statistics warrant induction into the Baseball Hall of Fame be inducted?
To me, either nobody goes in or the guys who statistically are in that category, then they all go in. But to sit back and just based on physical appearance or what we think we know, start randomly picking out guys who we should keep out and I say we, it's up to the baseball writers anyway, so I have nothing to do with it. But to me, we don't know what anybody's doing. And you know, you go back to the Mitchell report, that was one stream through the Mets clubhouse and Kirk Radomski or whatever his name is. It all fed off him. That's one guy. I mean, there are more suppliers, I would assume, than one person. So again, we don't know what anybody's done, and it's impossible to sit back and be 100% accurate saying, well, he did, he didn't, he did, he didn't. Therefore, that guy should go in and that guy shouldn't. We just don't know.